My daughter-in-law slid a deed across the table with my signature on it. My signature on a document I had never touched. I looked at the notary stamp and knew in 3 seconds exactly what she had done, because 4 months earlier, I had signed that notary's license revocation with my own hand. She told someone on the phone that women my age trust family and never figure things out. She was right about one part, but I am getting ahead of myself. If any part of what I just said sounds familiar to your own life, please stay with me, because I am going to tell you exactly what I did, and I am not going to skip the parts that were hard. My name is Stella Harmon. I am 71 years old. I live in Hardin County, Tennessee, about 12 miles from Pickwick Lake, in the same house Robert and I shared for most of our married life. I am telling you this story because there are women right now, probably a lot of them, who are signing papers handed to them by someone they love, and they are not reading those papers closely because they cannot imagine that love and fraud can live in the same household. I could not imagine it. And I worked in property records for 34 years. Has someone in your life ever handed you paperwork and said it was just a formality? Keep that in your mind while I keep going. I spent 34 years at the Hardin County Property Assessor's Office. I processed deeds, notary certifications, mortgage filings, license renewals, revocations. I did it so long that the paperwork started to feel like a second language. Numbers, stamps, dates, signatures. I could read a transfer document the way some people read a menu, quickly and without thinking much about it. I am not saying that to sound impressive. I am saying it because it matters to what happened next. Robert and I were married for 43 years. He was a high school math teacher with the kind of laugh that came out of nowhere and filled a room before you knew what was funny. He built our lake house himself over 3 summers in the early 90s, weekends mostly, cutting and fitting boards while I brought out sandwiches. And we argued pleasantly about whether the back wall was level. It wasn't quite. We loved it anyway. We had an oak table near the kitchen window where we sat every first of the month to pay bills together, coffee on both sides, a notepad between us. Robert used to say that if you could sit at that same table with someone for 40 years and still want to, you had figured out the most important thing. He was right about that. There was a wooden dock out back, built that 3rd summer. Every Saturday morning until he got sick, Robert sat at the end of it with a fishing pole and a thermos and almost never caught anything and seemed genuinely at peace about that fact. I still think about those mornings. The way the light came off the water before 8, our son Isaac married Vivian in the spring of 2019. I want to say clearly that I never disliked her. She was sharp and well put together, and she moved through rooms like someone who had already decided where she was headed. What I noticed, and I could not name it then, was that at family dinners, she would turn toward Isaac and talk about their financial future in a voice that was not impolite, but that somehow did not include me. The way you talk in front of furniture. Robert passed in April of last year. Lung cancer, and once it started moving, it did not slow down. 1 week after we buried him, Vivian began bringing up estate arrangements. Not once. Regularly. Did you catch that? 1 week. The first time she came to the house with paperwork, I noticed her nails before I noticed anything else. Careful. Not a chip anywhere, the kind of maintenance that takes real attention. But the hand holding the pen trembled, just slightly, while she explained what she needed me to look at. I signed what was straightforward, and I did not say anything about the trembling. I just filed it. The way you file something you do not understand yet, but know you will return to. What I did not know then was that Vivian had not started planning after Robert died. She had started before the funeral was over. 3 months later, a piece of mail arrived at my door addressed to Vivienne. Not a mistake anyone would necessarily catch. Same street, different house number, easy enough to mix up. The return label was from a notary office 2 counties over. I could feel through the envelope that it was a receipt of some kind, folded paper with a little weight to it. I set it on the kitchen counter, told myself I would hand it to her next time she stopped by. She stopped by that same evening. Isaac came too. After dinner, he fell asleep in the armchair the way he always does after a big meal, just like his father used to, head tilted the same direction and everything. I was at the kitchen sink washing up. Vivian was in the hallway with her phone. She did not know I was still in the house. I heard her voice first, low and controlled, the kind of voice people use when they have practiced sounding calm. She said I was 71 and had just lost my husband. She said I did not know what I had signed and I would not figure it out. She said women my age trust family. I did not move. I stood there with my hands in the dishwater, and I listened to her finish the sentence. And then I turned off the faucet and set the towel down on the counter and looked out the window at the dark outline of the lake through the trees. I did not go into that hallway. I did not say anything at all. What she said was not shocking because it was cruel. It was shocking because it was wrong. I knew exactly what I had signed in those 3 months. Every page. I had asked questions when something was unclear, and I had never, not once, put my name on anything that touched the lake house. So here is what I want to ask you. If you had been standing at that sink, what would you have done next? The next morning, I drove out to the lake house alone. Early November, the cold kind that does not apologize for itself. I walked down to Robert's dock and sat at the end of it with the misdirected envelope in my hand, just looking at Vivian's name on it. I was not out there crying about property. That is not what was sitting on my chest. What hurt was something I had not let myself see clearly. For 3 months I had been treated, quietly and consistently, as someone whose purpose was already served. Not a mother, not a homeowner, just a signature to collect before I got confused or stopped cooperating. They had looked at me and seen someone who was almost already gone. I sat there a long time. The cold came up through the dock boards. Then I stood up, went inside, and called Carolyn. Carolyn worked alongside me at the assessor's office for 19 years. She knew the systems, the records, the revocation files. When she answered, I did not explain everything. I just asked her one thing. I asked whether she remembered the notary license revocation we had processed back in June and whose name was on it. She called me back the next morning. Thomas Greer. Revoked June 14th. The moment she said his name, I remembered the whole file. I had been the one to sign the revocation recommendation. Greer had authenticated 2 fraudulent real estate transactions, and our office had flagged the pattern. I had signed that paperwork at my own desk with my own pen on a Tuesday afternoon. The date on Vivian's deed was October 3rd. 4 months after Thomas Greer had no legal authority to notarize anything. And here is the thing about working in county records for 34 years. You do not forget the files that mattered. I did not go to the county office myself to pull records. Every access request is logged by name, and I did not want Vivian to hear through anyone that I had been looking. Instead, I asked Carolyn, still on staff, to request a certified copy of the original lake house deed through the normal public process. Routine request, nothing unusual. She brought it to me 2 days later in a plain envelope and set it on my kitchen table and did not make a production of it. The original deed was from 1987. Robert Harmon and Stella Harmon, joint owners, right of survivorship, which meant when Robert passed, that property came to me in full, automatically, by law. There was no recorded transfer away from my name anywhere in the system. Vivian had not yet filed the fraudulent deed at the county office. She was still holding it. Can you guess what stopped her from filing it earlier? It turned out to be something almost embarrassingly small. Susan Park, the estate attorney I had quietly hired a few weeks before, found a property dispute from 8 months earlier involving a widow named Loretta Sims, 74, from a town about 20 minutes away. Loretta had signed what she believed were tax documents. What she signed transferred a piece of land out of her name. Vivian Harmon was the real estate agent in the middle of that transaction. Loretta did not have the money to fight it. I drove to Loretta's house on a Wednesday. I did not bring anything official. I knocked on her door and asked if she had a few minutes. She made coffee and we sat at her kitchen table, and she told me everything in the order it happened. Slowly, the way people do when they have been waiting a long time for someone to ask. Near the end, she mentioned something Vivian had said once, almost by accident. The way you say something when you are trying to explain yourself without admitting you need to. Vivian had told her that her family lost their home when she was 13, after her father's business collapsed. I drove home thinking about that. I did not feel sorry for Vivian. What she did to Loretta was deliberate. What she was trying to do to me was deliberate. But I understood, maybe for the first time, how someone could carry a fear like that for 30 years and let it quietly change the way they made every decision. Isaac was not a bad man. He had just trusted someone completely and never thought to look at what was underneath that trust. I kept going to Isaac and Vivian's house every Sunday. Brought a coffee cake one week, a pot of soup the next. I asked Isaac about his students. I let Vivian talk. One Sunday, she slid a document across the table and said it was just a routine estate update, standard stuff. I picked it up and read every word while she waited. Then I said my eyes were worse in the evening and I would finish it at home. She smiled and nodded. I folded it, put it in my purse, and never signed it. I also never said I would not. I just waited. Then, the week before hearing, Susan called me with something neither of us had expected. Vivian had tried to file the deed at the county assessor's office and been turned away. Not because anyone spotted fraud, but because a required secondary confirmation signature was missing. A routine gap. The clerk sent it back with a correction notice, and Vivian ran out of time to fix it before the probate date, which meant her only remaining option was to bring it into the hearing room and ask the judge to validate it directly. That was the mistake. Because I would be in that room, and I would be allowed to speak. What would you have put in that bag the night before the hearing? The hearing room was plain and small. Rectangular table, a few chairs, a window looking out at a parking lot. The judge sat in the center, Isaac and Vivian on one side, me and Susan on the other. Loretta Sims sat in the back, quiet, just in case she was needed. Vivian presented the deed with confidence. She told the judge Robert had expressed his intention for the lake house to pass to Isaac, that it had been a family discussion, that the deed reflected that wish. She set it on the table and folded her hands. Isaac looked at it. First time he had seen it. He leaned toward her and asked, low, whether his father had actually said that to her directly. She nodded without looking at him. I let her finish. Then Susan placed 3 documents on the table, one at a time. The first was the certified original deed from 1987, Robert and Stella Harmon. Right of survivorship, confirmed by the county assessor's office. The second was the license revocation record for Thomas Greer. Dated June 14th, bearing my signature as the assessor's office employee who had processed and recommended it. The third was the misdirected envelope, postmark still clear, return address from Greer's office, addressed to Vivian Harmon, delivered to mine. I looked at the judge, and I said that I had processed Thomas Greer's license revocation myself, that the stamp on the submitted deed was 4 months past that revocation date, and that I recognized my own work. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at Vivian. I kept my hands flat on the table. The room was quiet. Then Isaac looked at Vivian. She did not look back. He looked down at the deed, then at me, and I could see something moving through his face that was not quite anger and not quite grief, but some particular version of understanding that does not go away once it arrives. Vivian was referred for investigation on charges of property fraud and use of a revoked notary seal. The Loretta Sims matter was reopened. Vivian's real estate license was suspended during the inquiry. None of this happened quickly or with any drama. Legal processes do not work that way, and I was glad. I did not want drama. I wanted it handled. Isaac filed for divorce 3 weeks after the hearing. I had not told him to. He called on a Sunday evening and said he could not unknow what he knew now. I told him I understood, and I left it there, because there was nothing else that would have helped, and I was not going to pretend otherwise. The lake house stayed in my name. The fraudulent deed was never legally recorded. There was nothing to undo. The law simply held. I will be honest with you. I did not feel like I had won. I felt tired in a way that went all the way down into my bones. And then slowly, over the weeks that followed, I started feeling something lighter underneath the tired. The following spring, I stood on Robert's dock and finally knew what I wanted to do with that house. I set up a small trust, the Harmon Lake Trust, and arranged for the property to be available every summer as a free retreat for widowed women in the county who needed somewhere quiet. Every March, Carolyn and I run a session at the county library called Understanding What You Sign. We walk women through how to read a deed, what a valid notary stamp looks like, and when to stop and call an attorney before picking up a pen. Some of them have told me afterward that they went home and pulled out old documents and read them through for the first time. That means more to me than I know how to say out loud. Isaac came for Christmas that first year. We sat at the oak table with coffee and did not fill the quiet with words we did not mean. Before he left, he went to his car and came back with a framed photograph. Robert in 1994, on the dock, fishing pole in hand, thermos beside him, looking out at the water. Isaac hung it back on the wall where it had always been. We did not say anything about it. We just stood there for a moment, both looking at it. I do not forgive Vivian. I have thought a lot about that word, and I think it means something different from what most people use it to mean. What I can tell you is that I do not carry it anymore. Those are two different things, and knowing the difference took me longer than I expected. Some mornings I take my coffee down to the dock before the light has settled on the water. The lake is quiet. There is nothing I need to do except be there. Robert built that dock board by board over one summer a long time ago. It is still holding. I do not need to prove anything to anyone anymore. If you have ever been handed a piece of paper by someone you trusted and felt something you could not quite name, I would really like to hear about it in the comments below. And if you know a woman who is going through something like this right now, share this with her. She may need to hear that being quiet is not the same thing as being gone.